Hello, I think we're live. Hey
Here we
guys,
go.
how are you on this hump day? Megan Seaton and Abhijit Varakar, AV for short. We are Avero Advisors. So if you are joining us today, please leave a comment. Tell us where you're from and what you're doing. What are you doing on this Wednesday, on this hump day? And we'll get started in just a few seconds. Today, we're talking about ERP, RFP management.
Really
What the
fun
heck are you
projects.
asking for? What?
Really fun projects. No, go ahead.
It's fun. Most of my job is spent seeking out business for Avero, and a lot of my time is spent reading through thousands and thousands of RFPs. So this topic is very near and dear to my heart. So I'm excited to get your opinions, AV, on some of these questions I have that are RFP related.
Let's
So
go.
again, yeah, let's go. Let's do it.
Burning
Again,
question.
if you're here, leave a comment. Tell us where you're from and what you're doing today. And maybe if you have Valentine's plans, let's know that. I want to know what you guys are doing for Valentine's Day too. It's coming up.
What does that have to do with RFPs? Anyway,
That's okay. But, I mean, I don't know. Details,
yes.
details, details. Okay. Let's go. Let's go. All right, AV. Tell us. Let's get back to the basics. So let's tell our viewers why RFPs. Why would a local government entity go to RFP to outsource a project?
Well, they have to by law,
Right.
because they're a government entity. They have to be competitive. So they have to demonstrate that they're competitively bidding and selecting their vendors. So they're not showing favoritism or just picking vendors based on a personal preference. So if they do it right, they have to come up with a criteria and a scope and put it out there and have competition. That's the main purpose. And through competition, the intent is to get better pricing, better terms, so you're not just stuck with the same vendor for many years.
Right. Right. So are there any relevant like best practices that these entities should be doing before they sit down to kind of structure the RFP to add those details where they need to be?
So it depends on what it is, right? RFPs can be as simple as buying a bunch of rock. You know all about
Hmm.
that.
Yeah,
Hi,
absolutely.
Charlie.
Hey,
And
Charlie.
that's simple to me. I think it's like how many tons of rock do you want to buy and what kind, and that's a simple enough RFP. And it can get complicated, like if you're asking for architectural services, engineering services, you're looking for consulting services or a software or an ERP system, then you have to be really careful in terms of what specs you're putting in there,
Right.
because you should be able to compare things apples to apples. um,
Hmm.
how much does a software cost that has a different sticker on it versus another? You and I know that there can be a lot of nuances in what it might contain. So it's really important for purchasing agents and procurement directors to really make sure that when the RFP is going out, that it's documenting everything. Think about it as building a house. Here we go again. My
Yep.
same old analogy. How do you know how many doors and windows you want? And you can't just go out there and say, we need a house, so propose on a house. Now, we do see a lot of RFPs that we respond to that have no detail, and that's scary because
Right.
how are we supposed to respond to something that's vague? But we do a decent job of at least convincing or trying to convince our prospects that they need to go with us by giving more detail than is required. So, best practice: get your house in order before you put an RFP out. Understand what you're asking for, and do some market research on what's out there, because
Yes.
getting RFP responses in is the worst time to learn about a product. You should be
Mhm.
more educated than that on what's available, and that will educate you and your team on how to put a good scope of work and specs together.
Right. Is there a best way to structure an RFP? Um, I when I look at RFPs, some of them have a lot of legal language, and I know that's because of procurement processes and things like that, rules that they have to follow. But I love the RFPs out there that are very simple to follow.
Hmm.
They're straight to the point, very detailed. Is there a specific structure that these guys should be going after?
um, IKEA manuals, right? They're
Hmm.
not the most easiest to follow, because I'm thick maybe, but and I don't like looking at directions until things
Right.
get screwed up. So jokes apart, it should be easy to understand, right? Again,
Hmm.
the topic today is what the are you asking for?
Hmm.
Are you clear in what you need? And there's two or three components. First of all, it's the scope of work.
Hmm.
What is it that you're asking for is one thing, and then you have all of these other legal stuff, and you have your forms and ordinances and certifications about non-collusion and this, that, and the other. So when we respond to RFPs, and we have a great team that does that, um, we tend to look at it from a template sort of perspective. How do we
Hmm.
respond to the scope? And then the second thing is, how do we respond to these forms? And some proposals and RFPs we have, the forms are longer and bigger than the actual substance of what they're asking us to provide. So make it easy to understand, make it easy to follow, keeps very simple nomenclature and numbering systems,
Hmm.
because we get dinged for not following the format. So if it's going from ABC to 1 2 3, and
Yeah.
then you have A.1 and B.B, and they're asking you to follow this, are we supposed to correct those silly mistakes in an RFP, or are we supposed to just follow? My vote is to just follow, because again, I have done so many RFPs in my career that I know that you can get thrown out for not following the format, although it was wrong. So keep it simple, keep it understandable, and make your life easier, right? As a
Yes.
purchasing uh, agent or director or purchasing manager, when we respond to your RFPs, you are now reading a 200-page document, uh, and they will be that big if you haven't paid attention to really how to craft an RFP, and anticipating what kind of responses you might get. Because I know vendors out there will throw all kinds of brochures at you, and not take the time and the effort to really craft a response that's suited to what you're asking for.
Hmm. Right. How does one make sure that their RFP isn't biased?
Um, I think from a third party perspective, you need to make sure that it's not asking for a certain product or service. I mean, it's
Hmm.
easier with a service like ours, because you are asking for process redesign or IT project management. You're asking for implementation support. But if you're asking for a widget,
Hmm.
you can't necessarily say I want a certain brand, because again, going back to the rocks analogy, right?
Yeah.
When you're selling rocks, they don't have a brand. Of course, a company might sell the same rocks that another company
Hmm.
might sell. So it's important for, I think, the purchasing folks to uh, remain unbiased. Of course, that's their job, but the way they can do that is by not asking for specific brands. Because if
Hmm.
if I'm if I'm a reseller, if I don't sell that particular brand, now I'm out of luck, and there's cause for a protest saying, you're asking for a specific brand because you are biased, whereas my brand can be cheaper, better quality, what have you.
So let's get a little more specific. Let's talk about ERPs, ERP, RFPs. What, how would one go about defining the scope for an ERP specific RFP?
So the easy answer, but it's not the easiest one to do, right, is to
Right.
it's to do it right. And you've
Hmm.
heard me in presentations saying you've got to go back and eat your veggies. If
Yep.
you can't just go and buy a product without having thought through how this impacts your business operations, how this impacts your business processes, what requirements exist, how it impacts your other systems that are in there, other departments, elected offices. If you haven't thought this through and documented this, your RFP, and the whole process is going to fail. And we've seen that recently, right? Clients have brought us in because they have gone out and bought something through a quick and easy RFP that was 2 pages long, and then the vendor says, "Well, we responded to your RFP, so you can't hold us accountable
Mhm.
for things we can't deliver because it wasn't spelled out." So the best way, really, of doing that is the hard way. It's do the hard work up front, process redesign, think about how this impacts your operations. Um, Requirements definition is key because that list of 3,000 to 5,000 line items on a requirements definition then becomes your contract compliance tool. You can really hold vendors accountable. We've done this for our clients where they came in and said, "Yeah, we can do it," check marked, and then when it's time for implementation, they're like, we didn't really mean that. But we can then hold them accountable for the fees they're going to charge us for things that they don't really deliver. So back to your question, the short answer is there is no short answer. You have to do the work.
Right.
Otherwise, you're going to have to do it in the back end. It's going to cost you a lot more money and time.
Yes, absolutely. This is one of my favorite topics, and we could probably do a whole nother live on this topic alone, but timelines. Let's talk about timelines. We get asked that question a lot after our response is read and we're doing an in-person interview is
Mhm.
what about the timeline? Can we do this in the allotted 3 months that we put in our RFP? So let's just go for it. Talk about timeline. What is a good timeline when you're talking about ERP and modernization?
So I'm going to give you the consultant answer, right?
Okay.
It depends. But sorry, there is no cookie cutter answer. It depends on
Yep.
how big your organization is, what kind of modules you're wanting to implement, what your internal timeline is. Do you have an
Hmm.
external event that's gonna cause you some trouble? Like, for example, a lot of vendors these days are uh, sunsetting older versions of their systems, right? They say in 2025 we're going to stop supporting this system that you have, and you
Right.
have no choice but to go with an upgraded system that we sell. Or if you have to go out to an RFP and do this whole thing all over again. So timelines are up in the air because a lot of it depends on what your situation is. I
Yep.
was in a meeting yesterday where the original intent was to go all in with all the modules all at once, and it was going to take that city a year to do that. Conceivably, it was a smaller city,
Hmm.
but if you're a larger city, if you're a county that has 5,000 employees and a school system and a sheriff's office, that process takes a lot longer. Not necessarily from a technical perspective, but a lot of preparation, communication, political maneuvering needs to happen, change management needs to happen. So when we go in and respond to an RFP that says, "How long do you think this is going to take?" and they ask
Hmm.
for a Gantt chart, they ask for project plans, without us having had the opportunity to really read between the lines and ask questions. So
Sure.
it puts us on the back foot. The way we handle that is we say, "This is our best guess based on the RFP information. We're going to
Hmm.
guess that for a county of 3,000 people with these modules and this kind of mix of departments, we're probably going to look at 2 years from start to finish.
Hmm.
But we expect that when we go and kick the project off, that the first thing we do is create an actual project plan with dates and resources and budget items built in, with the understanding that over 2 years things will change. And a lot of it depends on the vendors that come to present. uh,
Sure.
like our timelines depend on what an ERP vendor says they might take to implement
Hmm.
their product, right? And a lot of times the magic number is 6 months. They say we'll do it
Right.
in 6 months, and
Hmm.
we say, let's take a large grain of salt with that, because we don't buy that you can actually get that done, especially if we are at that point after a fairly vague selection process where the RFP and the requirements were not well defined. It's really
Hmm.
hard to nail down the timeline. So we do our best to come with a proper timeline we think is applicable to the project. um, but timelines are moving targets, and you have to keep an eye on it through really good project management framework and process. But at the
Hmm.
same time, everyone needs to understand that uh, timelines can change. And this is especially true with go live date, right? Things to look out
Mhm.
for is software vendors will say, if you're starting in July of 2023, you will go live on March 1. And then they don't
Right.
give you a project plan. We've seen that a lot also.
Yes.
How do you know you will go live on March 1 if
Mhm.
you haven't given me the steps, the building blocks towards what that go live date will be?
Mhm.
So timelines are it's tricky, and I know you asked me that nuanced question because we don't have a straight answer.
Right. Absolutely. I love that question. So, what are some of the expected outcomes that our public sector clients should be expecting when they're writing an RFP? Let's just say maybe for both ERP software or an ERP consultant. What are some of those expected outcomes that they need to be thinking about?
I think the first one is quality of proposals, right?
Sure.
And then the
Hmm.
second one is quantity. After
Hmm.
going through a 3 to 6 month RFP development and solicitation process, if you only get two proposals in
Hmm.
from the two vendors you were hoping don't respond to this, right? Because
Right.
one is an incumbent you don't like, the other one has a terrible reputation in the market, and now you're stuck with two terrible choices. What do you do? So
Hmm.
it's really important that once an RFP is put out, and this is somewhere we come and help. Like if it's a software RFP that we
Hmm.
are overseeing, we will make sure that we market this on behalf of our clients,
Right.
and we push our clients to market it through their channels. You can't just put it out there and expect people to find it and respond to it and have a quality response. And the
Hmm.
timing of RFP releases also is critical because you can release it the week before Christmas and expect the day before Christmas or day after to get proposals in. People have
Yes.
lives. We're
Hmm.
professionals. We try to get it done, but be cognizant of the fact that you're sending an RFP out at a very difficult time for people to coordinate and respond to. And a lot of these, especially the large ERP software RFPs,
Hmm.
they have a lot of moving parts.
Oh
I am
yeah.
thankful we don't sell product because going through the requirements, making sure you understand the processes, making sure you're not misleading the client, that it takes a lot of work. So the expected outcome should be to get a good quantity and at very high quality of proposals.
Hmm.
And most recent clients of ours have gotten anywhere from 10 to 12 proposals for
Right.
ERP. And it's really sad and upsetting when a client that has done all of the hard work to get an RFP out only receives RFP responses from two bad choices. And then they either have to kill it and redo the whole thing, or they get stuck with a bad choice. So
Right.
seek out quality and quantity is would be my 2 cents.
Yeah. So I have two questions from some of our viewers here. One is pre-bid meeting or no pre-bid meeting? What are your thoughts on the pre-bid meetings?
I think it's important to do a pre-bid meeting for more difficult or complicated RFPs and proposals.
Hmm.
Because if you're buying rock, what
Right.
questions? I don't know. Charlie might have different. I'd love to be schooled on the art of selling rock, but
Yes, there
um,
is an art to it.
I'm sure there is. But what questions could you ask, right? But if it's an
Right.
ERP system, you want to know how many users, and there may be questions that clarify what's already in the RFP or the requirements. So it's really
Mhm.
important for us to have a pre-bid meeting when it comes to software solicitations, maybe
Yeah,
even for services like ours, like consulting. It's
sure.
helpful to have an ERP, to have a pre-bid meeting. And then it's also important to have pre-bid meetings because a lot of times we won't bid on a large project that we think we're not equipped to
Mhm.
handle, or we don't have quite all of the skill sets they're asking for. And then us as subcontractors and as MBE or DBE vendors, we'll seek prime vendors, right?
Mhm.
And the best way of doing that is through attending a pre-bid meeting.
Mhm.
And it's really helpful when our clients or prospects then release a pre-bid attendee list and mark them as DBEs or not. It helps us create connections in the industry and
Oh, yeah.
and go after these bids that we might otherwise not go for. So for those reasons, I think pre-bid meetings are important, but not for all purposes.
Yeah, absolutely. And then sometimes, if I've been on a pre-bid meeting where the client didn't necessarily know what they were asking for. So between the 10 of us that were on the pre-bid meeting, we changed their whole outlook on their project. And so very
Yep.
useful for that organization. So the second question is, what are some qualifications and experience that an entity might need to look for a vendor, maybe for our services and maybe even software vendors as well? So after they've responded, what is it that they should look for?
So before they release the RFP, again, part of
Mm,
the homework is to come up with this criteria. How are
mhm.
we going to pick a vendor?
Right.
And it helps you tremendously because then you have guidelines on how to pick a vendor that fits you. Of course, the first one is requirements. Can they meet our requirements? Technical, functional, business requirements. And then you tabulate them and score them. But there's also a subjective element to this. Uh,
Mm,
do they have a good reputation? Are there references saying nice things about them? And the worst is when a vendor provides a reference and the reference says really bad things about the vendor,
right.
right? So there's it's what's called qualitative and quantitative
Mhm.
analysis when we receive proposals and help our clients sift through these 200-page documents, tens of them, sometimes 10, 15 proposals come in. It's important to not just look at, of course, not just look at the lowest price, but also to look
Yep.
at how subjectively these vendors have served other clients, what their reputations are, what kind of product are they offering? Are they offering
Mhm.
something that's stuck in the 90s, or is this a modern looking product that has all the capabilities you're asking for? So coming up with a selection criteria before the RFP goes out, because that also allows the vendors to respond to those in their proposals,
Right.
right? We love that.
Mhm.
I love doing
Yes.
the whole looking at how you're going to judge our services and then
Mhm.
tailoring our responses to that specific selection criteria. And more
Yeah.
often than not, it's a there too, and it helps us when we go in and respond to put weights on what's important to our selection team.
Right. Absolutely. I have one more question as it relates to ERP and modernization projects. Who should be involved in creating this RFP? Um, who should be involved in the visioning? Because it affects everyone, right?
hmm
Projects like these. So, who should be involved in the RFP writing?
So it depends. Sorry, it depends on what the scope is. But let's just say it's a financial system.
Okay.
It should be run by the finance department,
Right.
and it's a fallacy when, I mean, IT CIOs, IT managers can run it too, but they don't understand. Most of them don't understand the nuances of financial processes.
Uh-huh.
So instead of treating it as an IT project, it really should be a finance project. So, of course, the finance department should run it, the CFO should be the main sponsor, and then IT can come in with their technical requirements for VPNing or connectivity, backups, cybersecurity, things like that. And and then once finance, with the help of consultants or not, provides the requirements that
Uh-huh.
go into the actual RFP. That's when purchasing comes into play, and they can then take the ball from there, put in their RFP formats, legal language, all of that, forms, all the fun stuff, and then they can release it. So, in a very simplistic way, I think the what I would call the main customer of the system. So, in this example, it's finance. It could be public works, it could be permits and building and zoning. Who's the main
Mhm.
customer? Though
Right.
they need to be involved from the beginning. IT for connectivity and backups and security reasons,
Hmm.
and then of course purchasing. And if you have a consulting team involved, that just helps keep everyone on the same page and make sure that things aren't falling through the cracks.
Yes, absolutely. I think we've covered everything RFP related. Do you have anything else, or does anyone else have any questions as it relates to RFPs?
Yeah, the title. what in the heck are you asking for?
Mhm.
With apologies, that's exactly how it goes, right? We respond
Yes.
to a ton of RFPs every year, and most of them are good. Uh, but things like, why do you want me to send 10 copies in paper format? Right?
Yes.
We did only electronic submittals during COVID, and then we thought this is the new era of responding to RFPs, and here we are sending 10 copies by mail. And so it's just frustrating. Some things like that doesn't
Yes,
keep us from
absolutely.
responding to those. But and then be clear about what you're asking for, because it just helps us provide a better quality response to you. The worst thing to do is send out a vague RFP that asks for 10 different things, but not one specific
Right.
response format or template. So we are really good at responding to these RFPs, but I wish all of them were easy to follow and had proper instructions and
And
guidelines for
clear,
what they're.
clear definitions of
Yep.
what you want, right?
Hmm.
Very clear asks.
Yep.
Um,
And
so
non-conflicting. It's
yes.
it's also difficult to respond to those. But anyway, we're not complaining because we're good at that. In
No, no, not us. We never complain about
no,
anything,
no,
about
no, no.
anything. But thank you all for joining us today. We will be back here next Wednesday. So feel free to stop by and chat with us. Thank you all.
Thanks, Megan. Bye.
Bye.